One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. I am a sucker for a good success story. I mean, I've shared here on the podcast before, but my kids laugh at me. My whole family laughs at me whenever I'm watching America's Got Talent, which is like our family show. Every single summer, we're like obsessed with America's Got Talent. And I always cry. It never fails. Like, the people will get on stage, they do their performance, and then you hear their backstory, then they get the golden buzzer. Like, I mean, I can get teary-eyed just thinking about it, because I love it when people succeed and seeing them, like, it's just like all their hard work has paid off. And it's my favorite. It really, truly is. Whenever I can hear someone's like journey of struggle or trying to do something that they've always wanted to do and they finally achieve that goal, I mean, it's everything. So today's episode is all about success stories and what success looks like and how you can set yourself up for success now and in the future. And I'm so excited about it. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? So what does success look like to you? Well, I'm a firm believer that you have to create your own definition of success, and more specifically, your content success. So this for me is having a balance between fun, creativity, and validation for my audience that I'm delivering quality content to them every single week. Like, I don't even have to mention the number of downloads that I have or subscribers or monetizing with a specific dollar amount, because those are important. Don't get me wrong. You need those to move forward on this path. But to me, they aren't the most important to my definition of success. And like I said, we all have to create our own version. Yours could look totally different than mine. If you're like, Crystal, I have no interest in having a podcast and a YouTube channel and a blog and an email list and Instagram and a Facebook group and like all these other things. If you're like, I have no desire to do any of that, awesome. I want you to create your own definition of success. But like I said earlier, I am just a sucker for whenever people achieve success. But in order to get there, you need a plan. So I wanted to talk about a few things that you can do to set yourself up for success in 2023. Right? So we can plan for it today and make it happen in 2023, because I never want you to listen to anything on the podcast and say, Crystal said I got to do this, so I got to do it today, right now, tomorrow. It's got to happen. Go, 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 go. That pressure is not super realistic, and I don't want you to put that kind of pressure on yourself. So the first thing that you can do, number one, if you're taking notes, right? If you're walking, you're jogging, you're walking the dog, you're driving, you can go to the show notes at any time, crystalprofit.com/episode 375 to go back and get a recap of everything we talked about here today. But the first thing you have to do is, one, know your content plan. And I've talked about this before, but what I will do is in January, I will sit down and I say, what do I want to publish this year? And I'm very realistic with my goals. I don't set like, oh, okay, I'm going to publish 5 YouTube videos. So 1 a day, Monday through Friday. And then I'm going to publish 3 podcast episodes and I'm going to post 4 things on Instagram every single, no, that is already, I'm laughing. I'm like, that's not realistic for me. I for sure know that. But what I will do is write out on a piece of paper. Yes, I actually do this on sheets of paper. It's like 12 sheets of paper for one month of every year. I'll print off one of those, like go into Word or Docs or Canva or wherever you want to do this, and get like a blank template for a calendar, one for every single month, and you can fill in the dates, and you could make it whatever you will. But what I will do is I will say, okay, every Friday I'll need to write an email. So I go down every single list. Okay, 52 emails, right? For 52 weeks of the year, I got to have an email. And then I say, okay, how often am I going to do my podcast episodes? I write those down. So every single month I wrote down on every Tuesday, boom, 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 podcast episode. Well, what about the potty report? What about social posts? Like all of this. And I know this sounds like a really cumbersome process, but then whenever that's finished, I will upload it into Asana and I will assign myself all the different dates and the tasks and everything so that whenever that month comes around, I know what I have to do. And this is what gives me permission to batch. It gives me that margin in my calendar to batch. And I know it takes a lot of time to set this up, but this is my system. This is my process. And this is part of how I can be successful with my content. It's my blueprint. It's my roadmap. It is my life force. And it allows me to be consistent and know what I have to do, when I have to do it, and how often I have to get my content out the door. So you need a content plan, whatever version of, whatever that looks like for you. I have tons of resources on this podcast and on my YouTube channel that you can go look more. If you're struggling with a content plan, content calendars, just look that up on my YouTube channel and you'll find a ton of videos of how I do this. But it's very important for you to have a content plan. Then the second thing to set yourself up for success is have a strategy for whenever life throws you a curveball. Now, this is something that is really important because I want you to be able to pivot when something unexpected happens completely out of nowhere. And this actually happened. We were in the middle of the easy peasy content training, one of the ones that we did earlier this week. And we had a community member, shout out Kathy. Kathy said, man, this happened to me recently. Like something just unexpected came out of nowhere and I had to pivot and make some changes. And so I know that it's not just me. Like it's not just me that, all of a sudden we'll have to go out of town or one of the kids are sick or we just have to change everything all of a sudden. Like, I have to work late. Like I had to just totally shift everything I had planned to do that day. So you need a backup plan for whenever something happens. And I don't mean you need like an entirely new strategy or plan B. I call this juggling your competing priorities, and you have to decide, okay, if you're looking at your calendar for a week and you could only publish one thing, what would it be? If you had to drop everything else in your content, what would be the one thing you got out? And I tell people, I'm like, well, I could record a literally 30-second or 1-minute podcast episode from my phone. I could. If I needed to get out a podcast episode, I could do that anywhere I have an internet connection. If I needed to write a 2-sentence email to my list to just get something out to be consistent, I could do that. So those are the two major pieces of content that I have committed to. I say, if nothing else, these are the two things that I will get out to my audience. So this is my strategy for whenever life throws me a curveball, is I can still do these two things that I know will keep the content rolling, even if life happens and something comes up unexpectedly. And then the third thing about setting yourself up for success is being intentional about what your content can do for you. Now, this is a little bit, and we're going to get into this because it's a little nuanced, but I want to really look at what is your content doing for you? Because I know often we look at how is your content helping other people? And I think that that's where you should start, right? This should be the purpose of your content, is to help someone else, to give them a different perspective, to teach, to educate, to entertain, like wherever your content falls in this spectrum, it should be to help others. But I also want you to be aware and intentional about what your content can also do for you. Because when you're aware of this, it gives you a little bit more of a push to put it out there and to actually make it happen. And I wanted to share some examples from previous students of mine and people that are members of this community. So there's going to be lots of shout outs today. But when we talk about what your content can do for you, I wanted to share a little bit about Brittany's story. So Brittany has been in this community for a long time. I feel so lucky that I got to meet her back in 2019. Is that how long ago it was? Like it feels like it was just yesterday, but also a lifetime ago. But it was so cool to help Brittany get her podcast going and get it started. And the things that she says about her podcast now, it's just so incredible. So I wanted to read this to you. Brittany says, "My podcast helps me show up as the expert that I am. Your tagline about everyone starting somewhere really spoke to me because I have a similar philosophy. My podcast helps me to show up as the expert that I am and has boosted my confidence." And that's Brittany Binion for the Posed for Success host, and she's a previous student of mine. So I love that she says it's boosted her confidence. And I don't know about y'all, but I love confidence boosters. I love things that help remind me of who I am, the things that I'm really good at. And I know Brittany is really good at branding, at photography, at helping entrepreneurs really solidify their message in a way that just highlights all the incredible things that they already have going in their personality and the different aspects of who they are as a person. This is her specialty. So I wanted to give her a huge shout out because she's gone on to do incredible things with her podcast through her business. And I'm just so proud of her journey. But then I also wanted to tell you about validity. Now, I mean, is anybody out there just saying, I really wanted to start my podcast, but I did not know if it was going to be validated. Like, there's this thing that I want to talk about, or maybe it's your podcast, your YouTube, your blog, and you're like, I really want to put this out into the world, but I don't know how it's going to be received. I don't know if the audience that I think is going to listen to it is really going to love it. And so I wanted to tell you about Michelle, because Michelle was like, I feel validated once she put her big idea for her show out into the world. She actually said, I'm shocked. Okay, here's her story. She said, I had a dream of launching my podcast, but didn't know what that needed to look like. I just needed direction, and that's exactly what you brought. Here I am 4 days into my podcast with 116 downloads and validity. I'm shocked at the number of congratulations and the elevation of authority it brings. Thank you so much for offering your courses, content, and support. That's from Michelle Braswell of the Wedding Pro Show, and she's a previous student of mine. And I just love hearing this. I love that she said the elevation of authority it brings, because that is what happens. I know my mom, so my mom has a podcast, she has a YouTube channel, and I remember she was out at a dinner party. I wasn't there, but she was telling me the story. And she said, I was at a dinner party and I was telling somebody about permaculture and gardening, which is what she loves to talk about. And she was giving these people all these tips and, like, oh, you could do this. And they were telling her like very specific problems they were having in their garden. And she said, oh, I have a podcast episode about that. Or you know what? Even better, I did a YouTube video about it. And the shock on those people's faces, she said that they were just like, what? You have a YouTube, like you do YouTube and you have a podcast? That is so wild. And I could just tell from the way she was telling the story, she was so proud. She was so proud that she was able to say, yeah, I do. I have it was instant authority, instant validation that she was credible to talk about the stuff that she wanted to share about. So Michelle, I know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about validation and really getting it out there. And then I want to talk about Caitlin. So Caitlin is someone who has been in our community probably the longest out of most people here, because Caitlin is actually someone who was in our community before I switched to teaching podcasting. So I was getting my podcast done, and we have a mutual friend, and Caitlin had reached out to me and was like, you know what? I think I really want to do this. Like, can you help me get started? And so this is before I even had Profit Podcasting out there. She was one of my first clients, if you want to call it that. I mean, Caitlin goes way, way back. But I love that she said, Crystal was always there and willing to provide a hand. She went above and beyond to help me get my podcast going. The podcast is soaring. I've got raving fans, and I know it's time for me to begin offering my audience even more services. I'm so grateful for the opportunities this podcast is bringing my way, and so happy to have Crystal's expertise in my corner. And that was Caitlin Fusco from the Happy Home Birth podcast. And I mean, I can't even imagine where her show is today. I know that her Instagram blew up after she started her podcast. And if you have any interest in the home birthing space, or you're a doula or a midwife, like, her podcast is incredible. And the stories that she shares on there, I feel like she's created this haven and this beautiful space for people that want to share these stories and want to talk about something that may not be as mainstream. I mean, I've never had a home birth. I don't know anybody that has besides Caitlin and her community. And so I love that whenever people come into my space now and they're like, oh, I'm interested in home birth, but I don't know the risk, I immediately say, oh, I have the perfect expert for you. Go listen to Caitlin's podcast. She knows all about this. She shares all these stories, and she is just the go-to person. So not only does she have raving fans that are in her audience, she has immediately solidified a place in my mind to always say, oh, you want to know about this topic? We're going to go to Caitlin. We're going to go immediately to her podcast. So cool, right? This is the impact that your content can have whenever you have that solid foundation and a very strong topic that you are speaking on. And then I love telling April's story. So April is a dear friend. We've worked together in multiple capacities. And if you listen to the Potty Report, this is my daily show, she is the genius behind the logo. Yes, she is. She created this. I am forever grateful for this logo. And a lot of people don't know this. I've told this story before, but y'all, if you zoom in, if you go and if you can zoom in on the artwork, it's a woman sitting on a toilet. Like, did you know this? Like, it's a woman sitting on the toilet looking at her phone. This is what the logo is. And I've told people that who've been listening to the show for a long time. And they're like, I've been listening to this for over a year. I had no idea that. Yep, April is the genius behind that. So thank you so much, April. But I want to share a little bit about her story, because what April said is, I love the way you teach and the energy you bring. Podcasting is easy. I actually love podcasting. And this is April Bradford from the Little Miss Course Creator podcast. And she's a previous student of mine. And like I said, we worked together in several capacities. But the thing that makes my heart so happy about her saying this is she says, I actually love podcasting.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Because at the end of the day, one of my biggest goals is to help you, yes, you listener, right now, I know you hear me, is to help you create with confidence and have this love affair with your content to where you are like, I love it so much. It brings me so much joy being able to help other people or share this information that I have or spread this message that you have on your heart to share with the world. That is really what gets me going and fired up. And it's why I continue to show up here, because I hear these stories all the time. So if at any time I ever have any doubts of, am I on the right track? Am I doing the right thing? I go back into our community and I read these stories and I just get so re-inspired by the incredible things that y'all are doing. But maybe you're listening to this and you know that Radical Repurposing, this is my brand new program. It actually closes on October 27th. That's when enrollment is going to be shut down. But if you're wondering, well, these are great for all of your previous podcasting students, but I don't podcast, or I don't want to have a podcast. What does it look like to learn from you? Well, I wanted to share with you a little bit about what it's like to learn from me from 2 of my previous students that gave me really good insight into how they received coaching either through this podcast or through my previous program. And one of those is Matt. So I love Matt's story because he shared this. We did a recent interview on his show and he shared this story with me, and it just made me smile so much because it was part of the introduction. And I was like, that was the best introduction I've ever heard. It was absolutely incredible. But he said, I was blown away. I was outside, it was a Saturday, and I'm doing yard work, and Crystal starts talking about different aspects of podcast strategy. And I remember being so blown away that I stopped what I was doing outside with yard work. I came inside, I sat down at my table, and I started to take notes. Those notes would eventually lead to the launch of this podcast. And I was so blown away by the different things that Crystal said. So shout out to Matt Zahn with the Stories with Traction podcast. It still makes me smile so much because he's already on. I mean, I think that I was episode maybe 39, 40-ish. So he's doing it. Like, this isn't just someone who was like, oh, I listened to this podcast. It was great. I took some notes. Like, he got into action and made it happen. And I mean, it's going to be coming up on a year that his show has been out before we know it. Like, I already know it. And Matt's probably listening is like, oh my gosh, Crystal, like, that's really crazy to think about. But it's true. It is. Like, you got into action, you made it happen, and you put it out into the world. And I'm over the moon excited for what is ahead in your journey. But all of that happened not from me telling you all these things. It's from taking action. It's from taking what you've learned and putting it into action. And what I'm doing inside Radical Repurposing is taking all the marketing tips and strategies and content optimization and all the things that I have learned from publishing over 1,000 podcast episodes, more than 400 YouTube videos, so many blog posts, so many emails, so many Instagram posts. I mean, I took everything over the last 4 years and condensed it down into bite-sized pieces that you can learn in short videos, very short videos. I think one of the longest videos might be 12 minutes. Like, that's it. That's the longest video in this whole course. The rest of them are shorter than that. And then they have worksheets that help you get into action and put what you've learned into action right away. That way you're not just consuming. Because I know there's so many of you. I did this too. I was listening to all the podcasts and I was watching all the YouTube videos and I was reading all the emails and consuming. But I wasn't getting into action. I was not. And it wasn't until I started really investing my time back into myself and back into learning and really committing to growing and scaling my content. And if you're like, well, Crystal, I really need someone to hold my hand through some of this stuff because it feels scary and it feels super overwhelming, I want you to hear from Sydney Eve. So Sydney, I'm still so grateful for all the incredible things that you have helped me with. Like, we have gone on to work together. She's a previous student of mine, but I've gone to recommend her multiple times as a graphic designer and all the cool things that she does too. But she said, I know that you are always there. So part of her story was I needed to publish content that I knew my ICA, my ideal customer avatar, would find compelling. And to be honest, over the time that I've been working with you, I know that you're always there. You're teaching in public every week. You're constantly moving with the way that the platforms are evolving. And Crystal had the solution to my problem before I even knew I had that problem. So that's Sydney Eve Matrix from the Courses That Captivate podcast. And I'm so grateful for you, Sydney. I think that you have such a wonderful presence in helping others. She's always giving back to people in her community, and she's so uplifting of other online entrepreneurs and people that are creating content, putting all the pieces of themselves into their business in a way that really matters. And she just shows up in such a big way. And I just have the biggest smile on my face, Sydney Eve. So this is just, it's so good to read what you said, because I am grateful to have members like you in our community that you are so willing to give back. So not only do you receive, you're like, okay, I know that you're there. I could ask you questions, but you receive that and then you turn that back out into the world and you help others with what they're doing. And I think it's just such a beautiful cycle of gratitude and giving back. And all of these stories just give me so much joy. It's why I wanted to share them here today. It's why I wanted to talk about different versions of success. Do you notice how none of these had anything to do with downloads? None of these had anything to do with subscribers and I'm making millions and I'm doing none of it. That was not their definition of success. Their success was getting into action, getting started, building authority, feeling validated, getting their stuff out into the world. And so if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I want to do that too. I want to take what I'm already creating and turn it into something bigger or elevate my message to a whole different level. Join us in Radical Repurposing. The doors close on October 27th. So if you're listening to this after that point in time, then the doors are closed for 2022. I'm going to be reopening them again in January-ish. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but the price is going to go up. I'm throwing it out there now. You can join at our founding members price, and I'm going to have a link in the show notes to go check everything out. So go to crystalprofit.com/episode 375 for everything that we talked about here today. But I don't want you to miss out on this because this is the most affordable option you're ever going to have to join us in this program because this is the best one I've ever created. This is the best thing I've ever created. And I know I shouldn't say that because I think that I've felt this way in the past about other programs, but I was wrong. I can say that with full confidence. I was wrong. I have poured more time, more energy, more money, more just blood, sweat, and tears into this because I've heard you. I've heard so many of you say that this is what you need. You don't need another how-to video to get started with your podcast. You don't need another thing to help you with your marketing. You need to know, how do I tie it all together? How do I get strategic where I am working smarter and not harder and not overwhelming and stressing myself out and I'm so close to the edge of burnout? If this is you, join us in the program. Join us in Radical Repurposing, and I promise you will get your questions answered. I want you to go and check out all the bonuses that we have. We have the FAQ vault that's going to have common answers to so many questions that I see on a regular basis from creators. We're going to have our private Slack channel that is just for community members where you're going to have direct access to me. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to help other people in the community. We have specific sections for different types of questions, whether it's for marketing, for blogging, for podcasting, for YouTube, for email, for social, all the things. If you have so many questions, you're like, Crystal, I don't even know where to start. Get in the program, go through the different modules and the lessons, and then ask your questions. Ask them. Don't sit around wondering, what should I do next? Or relying on Google or YouTube to help you out, because at the end of the day, you're going to keep going in circles and you're going to be in the same place that you are right now this time next year if you don't get into action. So get into action. Whether that is joining us in the program or doing something else, I just encourage you, get into action. Stop just consuming, and do something about it. I truly encourage you to evaluate, what does success look like to you and how can you make it happen? So one last time, the doors to Radical Repurposing are closing at 6 p.m. Central on October 27th, 2022. So go join before the doors close. But that's all I have for you today. I love sharing these stories of success. Shout out to everyone else in our community that has an amazing, incredible story of how you are able to do amazing things on your journey. But that's all I have for you today. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.